Welcome to another quiet journey through the past. You're listening to The Sleepy Historian, where boring history for sleep becomes a gentle way to rest. If you enjoy falling asleep to boring history, soft storytelling, and bedtime relaxation, you're in the right place. Tonight's episode is a soft-spoken history documentary, a calm bedtime exploration designed for those who love relaxing history to fall asleep to history sleep stories and the peaceful rhythm of ancient and medieval life. If this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to imagine others, across time zones and quiet bedrooms, slowly falling asleep to the same old stories. So dim the lights. Let the dreams of the Middle Ages unfold. Let the soft hum of forgotten beliefs carry you back across centuries into candlelit chambers and cold stone halls, where sleep was never simple and dreams were not merely private. They were messages, prophecies, even warnings whispered from the unseen world. In the Middle Ages, people saw dreams as bridges between heaven and earth, windows into the soul, or doorways to temptation. A peasant might wake troubled by a vision of a dark road, believing it to be a sign of misfortune. A monk might record his nightly visions in the margins of a manuscript, hoping to find divine meaning in what flickered through his sleeping mind. Over the next 2 hours, we'll wander through those medieval nights together, exploring how people dreamed, what they believed about those dreams, and how the boundaries between the sacred and the subconscious blurred beneath flickering candlelight. Our journey will unfold in 4 gentle parts. First, we'll begin with daily life immersion, what it felt like to drift into sleep in a medieval world, where darkness was deep and silence never quite complete. Then, we'll turn a biography and event, following the story of a medieval thinker who tried to interpret the language of dreams. Next, we'll move to mystery, archaeology, and culture, uncovering strange artifacts and writings that preserve the dream beliefs of the age. Finally, we'll visit the contrasting worlds, how dreams differed between monks and nobles, peasants and kings, each finding meaning in the shifting images of their night visions. This is not a story of battles or conquests. It's a story of minds half awake, of faith, superstition, and the tender quiet between sleep and dawn. So take a slow breath. Let the hum of the world fade away. Imagine yourself beneath a coarse woolen blanket, the faint glow of embers tracing shadows across a wooden beam. Outside, a dog stirs. The air is still, and somewhere, in a time not your own, a dream begins. Imagine yourself in a medieval village sometime around the 12th century. The day has ended slowly, as all days did then. With no electricity to chase away the dark, only the gradual dimming of light, the quiet surrender of the world to evening. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and damp straw. Somewhere nearby, a stream murmurs through the twilight, reflecting the last pale ribbon of the setting sun. Inside a small timber house, a family prepares for sleep. The floor is packed earth, cool beneath bare feet. A low fire flickers in the hearth, more for comfort than for warmth. Shadows stretch along the rough walls, where herbs hang drying. Sage, lavender, and thyme, their scent gentle but distinct. The day's labor has ended, but the night brings its own quiet rhythm. Prayers, murmured softly, and the familiar creak of settling wood. In this world, sleep came early and often in segments. People spoke of the first sleep and the second sleep. The first came soon after dusk, deep and dream-filled. Then, a few hours later, many would wake, not fully but enough to stir, tend the fire, or even step outside beneath the stars. In that still, liminal hour between sleeps, the mind drifted easily toward reflection and imagination. It was said that the dreams of the first sleep were of the body, earthy, practical, while those of the second were of the soul. A mother might dream of her child laughing in sunlight and wake smiling, believing it to be a blessing. A farmer might see a field choked with weeds and wonder if it foretold a poor harvest. dreams were never meaningless. In an age before psychology, before medicine could explain the turns of the mind, dreams were messages, sometimes divine, sometimes deceptive. To dream was to receive something beyond understanding. You can picture the family now, lying together beneath wool and linen, listening to the breathing of one another. The father's hands are rough from work, the mother's hair faintly scented with smoke. The children murmur in their sleep. A mouse rustles in the thatch. The night hums with quiet life, distant dogs, the slow sigh of wind through the trees, and the faint, rhythmic sound of the human heart surrendering to rest. Above them, the heavens gleam with strange precision. To medieval eyes, the stars were not just distant suns. They were symbols, signs of order, perhaps even script written by God. Their steady glow comforted those below, reminding them that the world was purposeful, that even in the chaos of daily toil there existed a vast and silent pattern. Imagine lying there, your thoughts dissolving slowly, your breath evening out with the rhythm of the night. Perhaps you, too, will believe that dreams held meaning. When there were no clocks, no glowing screens, no voices from far away, only your own. The boundaries between waking and dreaming blurred easily. The fire's light might dance on the wall, and in that glow, you might see shapes that were not quite real, but not entirely imagined either. Dreams might come soft at first, the echo of a conversation, the sound of footsteps in a familiar field. Or they might arrive fully formed, vivid yet calm. Medieval people often recorded dreams as warnings or guidance. A baker might dream of losing his loaf to fire and take it as a sign to be cautious the next day. A pilgrim might dream of a shining road and believe it a divine invitation to travel farther. The church offered both comfort and caution. Monks taught that not every dream was sent from God. Some were temptations, whispers from darker forces. Others were reflections of one's own sins or desires. To understand a dream was to navigate between heaven and deception. But even fear took on a quieter shape in those times, softened by ritual and faith. A frightened dreamer might sprinkle holy water, murmur a psalm, or light a candle for protection before returning to sleep. Outside the cottages, the village itself rested. Chickens roost, oxen stood quietly in their stalls, and the distant watchman's bell marked the passing hours. The darkness was complete, deep, velvety, and full of mystery. To modern eyes, such darkness would feel unnerving. But for the medieval sleeper, it was a familiar companion, a cloak drawn gently around the world. And in that darkness, the realm of dreams awaited. To fall asleep was to step into a landscape that mirrored life but spoke in riddles. The dreamer might wander fields that seemed both known and unknown, meet faces from long ago, or hear music without source. It was said that souls traveled in sleep, that part of the spirit drifted beyond the body, visiting places unseen. The sleeping mind became a bridge, a delicate thread between earth and eternity. If you listen closely, you might almost hear the soft murmur of prayers fading into the night. Pater Noster, ca es in caelus. The familiar rhythm of Latin words echoing through dark rafters. 1,000 years ago, that sound meant safety, a plea for peace as consciousness dissolved into dreaming. So as the first sleep settles over the village, the embers glow and the stars turn overhead. Somewhere, a man dreams of an endless road. Somewhere else, a woman dreams of her long-lost child, smiling from a sunlit meadow. And above all of it, silence. The kind of silence that invites thought to slow, breath to deepen, and the mind to drift freely through the soft, unhurried corridors of the past. As the night deepens, the fire in the hearth fades to soft embers, and the rhythm of the medieval village settles into silence. The sounds of the day, the clatter of wooden pails, the shuffle of feet on dirt, the bleating of goats, all dissolve into stillness. Only the faint whisper of wind through thatched roofs remains, and the occasional low hum of nocturnal insects. In that quiet, dreams begin to stir like gentle ripples spreading across still water. The sleeping mind of a medieval person was not private, not in the way we think of it today. Dreams were thought to come from outside the self, from angels, from demons, from God himself. What passed through one's mind in sleep was not merely imagination, but revelation. To close your eyes in the 13th century was to open them upon another world, one shaped by faith, by fear, and by centuries of inherited wonder. Imagine, for a moment, a small Benedictine monastery resting atop a misty hill. The monks have completed Compline, their final prayer of the day. Their chants still linger faintly in the corridors, echoing in the stone. They retire to their narrow cells, simple rooms with little more than a cot, a candle, and a crucifix. Here, even sleep was an act of devotion. Before lying down, a monk might trace the sign of the cross in the air, whispering a psalm, surrendering his mind to divine guidance. In such stillness, the night feels almost alive. The candle flickers, and the walls seem to breathe. Outside, the forest sighs with unseen movement. Owls, perhaps, or the rustle of a small animal searching through fallen leaves. The air is cold, but not harsh. It presses softly against the stone, carrying the scent of pine and smoke. The monk's thoughts drift, slow and unhurried. Then quietly, sleep gathers him in its arms. In his dream, he might walk the halls again, though they seem broader, infinite, and glowing with strange light. He might see a figure, not clearly, but felt more than seen, offering a book or a flame. The vision feels meaningful, though its meaning cannot yet be named. When he wakes, just before dawn, he will remember it vividly and record it in the monastery's dream register, a text kept not for curiosity, but for discernment. Each dream, no matter how small, was examined for moral weight. Was it holy? Was it deceitful? Or was it merely the echo of the day's thoughts? Such questions filled the quiet corners of medieval life. Scholars like Macrobius, whose writings survived from ancient Rome, were still studied and debated. He taught that dreams came in 5 kinds: somnium, the symbolic dream; visio, the prophetic dream; oraculum, in which a figure spoke clearly; insomnium, the restless dream born of worry; and phantasma, the meaningless illusion of a fevered mind. These categories drifted through the centuries, shaping how monks, peasants, and nobles alike understood their sleep. To the common villager, though, interpretation was simpler, more immediate. A dream of falling might mean misfortune. A dream of bread might mean abundance. Seeing one's deceased parent was thought to be a sign of care from beyond. A dream of water could signify purity or fear, depending on how it appeared. Patterns and symbols wove themselves into a language understood not through scholarship, but through shared stories, passed quietly from one generation to another. In winter months, dreams took on a particular depth. Nights stretched long, and firelight danced across rough ceilings as the wind groaned outside. People wrapped themselves tightly in furs or wool, listening to the faint creak of beams. In that drowsy space between waking and sleep, imagination softened the edges of the world. It wasn't unusual for a sleeper to dream of warmth or of green fields, small comforts born of longing. And when morning came, these dreams might be retold beside the hearth, not as fantasies but as omens worth remembering. The rhythm of medieval rest was slow and segmented. After the first sleep ended, that middle interval, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2, was filled with quiet activity. A man might mend a tool by firelight or whisper prayers. A woman might nurse her child or sit silently, simply watching the flames. Some couples spoke gently in those hours, the time considered particularly blessed for intimacy and reflection. And when sleep returned, the second sleep, dreams were said to turn softer, more spiritual. These nocturnal customs gave shape to medieval nights in ways we can scarcely imagine today. There was no rush to fall asleep quickly, no clock to command waking. Night was not something to escape, but to inhabit slowly and entirely. Dreams were companions, mysterious, yes, but familiar, and deeply interwoven with faith. Even in castles, where the air was cold and tapestries hung to soften the chill, the same understanding prevailed. A knight might dream of battle and take it as warning. A lady might dream of her absent husband, interpreting it as a message of safety or longing. The line between the physical world and the spiritual one was not as sharp then. Every dream, no matter how fleeting, carried the possibility of truth. You can almost feel that quiet certainty, that deep medieval trust in meaning. To dream was not to wander aimlessly through nonsense, but to listen, humbly, for what might be spoken through symbols. It was a gentle surrender to the unseen. And perhaps that belief, though ancient, still has something soothing in it. The idea that every flicker of imagination, every strange image of the night, might be part of a vast and peaceful conversation between the soul and the world around it. Morning comes slowly to the medieval world. There are no alarms, no clocks striking the hour, only the subtle shift of sound and light. The sky moves from ink black to gray, and then, gently, to a pale gold that touches the tops of cottages and church spires. In the first thin light, smoke begins to rise again from hearths, curling lazily through the air. The village wakes one breath at a time, but in many hearts, the dreams of the night still linger. A peasant, stepping out to the chill morning, might carry the residue of a vision, a strange encounter, or a vivid image that clings to the edge of memory. He might tell it to his wife, who listens quietly, nodding, already shaping meaning from it. Dreams were not private curiosities. They were part of the language of community. People spoke of them with the same quiet seriousness as they spoke of weather or harvest. At the village well, women might share their nightly visions as they filled their pails. I dreamed of white doves, one might say, and woke to the sound of the wind in the thatch. That's a sign of peace, another would reply, recalling a priest's sermon about purity and divine favor. Each dream, however small, became a thread in the fabric of understanding that bound the community together. For those who could write, few though they were, dreams sometimes found their way into the margins of manuscripts. A scholar might pause in his copying of scripture to jot down a vision, curious or profound. His words, now faded and cramped between the lines, remain silent witnesses to a world that never separated waking from sleeping as firmly as we do now. The dream and the daylight world overlapped like reflections in still water. Imagine walking through such a world, one where meaning was everywhere. A falling star was not simply an atmospheric event, but a sign. The hoot of an owl might foretell illness or a journey, and a dream, with its shifting images and strange voices, was a message to be read, pondered, and prayed over. In towns and cities, people sometimes visited dream interpreters. These were men or women thought to possess special insight, capable of discerning what others could not. Some drew from scripture, others relied on ancient texts, especially the Somniel Danieli's, a medieval dream manual that circulated widely in Latin and the vernacular. In its pages, dreams were listed alphabetically, like a dictionary of the subconscious. To dream of apples meant joy. To dream of bees meant profit. To dream of a storm was a warning. This book, copied and recopied by hand, traveled across centuries and kingdoms, from the monasteries of England to the merchant cities of Italy. Each copy bore the marks of its scribe, a note in the margin, a correction, a personal dream scribbled in haste. The Somniel Danieli's was not read for entertainment. It was a tool, a quiet companion in the long, uncertain nights of the Middle Ages. In noble courts, too, dreams carried weight. Kings sometimes consulted their confessors about troubling visions. Chroniclers recorded such moments with solemnity. A ruler dreaming of fire might interpret it as divine warning, urging restraint or repentance. A queen dreaming of a child might see it as a promise or an omen. These beliefs were not superstition to them. They were part of the texture of faith, woven into the divine order that governed all things. Even in the humblest homes, dream life had its rituals. A mother might bless her child before bed, tracing a small cross on their forehead to ward off bad dreams. A man who had suffered a nightmare might sprinkle a few drops of holy water on his bedding before the next sleep. The world of the unseen was always near, not frightening, but present, watchful, and full of mystery. The rhythm of medieval night and morning, of dreaming and waking, was a rhythm of patience. There was no rush to understand every symbol, no frantic search for certainty. Meaning unfolded slowly, over days or weeks, through quiet reflection, prayer, and conversation. The people of the Middle Ages lived with mystery not as something to solve, but as something to dwell within, like a soft fog that both concealed and comforted. The boundary between dream and reality was not so sharp as ours. A dream might lead to a decision. A farmer might delay planting his seeds because of a troubling vision. A merchant might choose a new route for his journey after dreaming of a flooded bridge. Faith and practicality blended easily. The world of sleep shaped the waking world in ways subtle but enduring. And as morning brightened, those dreams slowly dissolved into the tasks of the day, tilling the soil, tending to animals, kneading dough. Yet even as hands worked and feet walked, some part of the mind still lingered in the other world. The rhythm of the plow matched the rhythm of thought. The mind drifted gently, recalling fragments of the night. Imagine standing at the edge of a medieval field now, the dew clinging to the grass, the soft breath of cattle rising in the air. Somewhere a bell tolls from a distant church, marking the early hour of prime. The light spreads softly, turning mist to gold. You can almost feel how dreams and waking life intertwined, one flowing naturally into the other, neither entirely real nor unreal, both essential to the slow, steady heartbeat of the age. The dreamer, stepping into daylight, does not dismiss what he saw. Instead, he carries it quietly within him, not as fear or fascination, but as part of the gentle mystery that shapes his life. And as the world stirs fully awake, the dream fades, not gone, but resting, waiting to return when the sun sinks once more and the first sleep descends again upon the earth. Our next step in this quiet journey through medieval dreaming brings us to a man who spent his life studying visions, not through experiment or science, but through contemplation and faith. His name was Guillaume d'Auvergne, a 13th century bishop and philosopher. He lived in Paris, at a time when scholars were beginning to reconcile Christian theology with the rediscovered writings of ancient Greece and Arabia. Yet for all his learning, Guillaume was fascinated by something utterly personal, the strange theater of the human mind at rest. Imagine Paris in the 1230s, not the bustling city of lights we know today, but a smaller, more enclosed world. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke and tallow. Bells from the great cathedral of Notre Dame echo through narrow lanes. Scholars in long robes hurry between lectures at the university, parchment scrolls tucked beneath their arms. The Seine flows quietly, reflecting flickers of torchlight. It is a world poised between faith and inquiry, a world where dreams are not dismissed as illusion, but examined as possible echoes of divine truth. Guillaume d'Auvergne, as bishop, had read deeply in Aristotle, Augustine, and the Islamic philosophers of Cordoba. He believed that dreams could be a natural phenomenon, the work of the soul processing impressions of the day, yet also that they might sometimes carry messages from heaven. In his treatise De Universo, he wrote with calm precision about the way the imagination, freed from the senses during sleep, could receive images placed there by angels or, more cautiously, by darker spirits seeking to mislead. You can picture him in his chamber late at night, the sound of the cathedral bells fading beyond the window. His desk is lit by a single candle, its flame steady in the still air. Before him lies a manuscript, not a printed book, for such things do not yet exist, but a thick sheaf of parchment, the ink dark and faintly glossy. Guillaume's quill moves slowly, the the scratch of its nib blending with the faint hiss of the candle. He pauses often, gazing into the flame as if it might itself yield meaning. Outside, the city sleeps. The hum of distant voices fades into the slow, steady rhythm of horses' hooves on cobblestones, then silence. Guillaume lifts his eyes and wonders, do angels dream? Does God? And if the divine can reach the human mind through dream, what happens in the minds of those who deny its origin? He is not alone in such thoughts. Across Europe, clerics, mystics, and scholars are writing similar reflections. Hildegard of Bingen, a century earlier, had recorded luminous visions she described as the reflection of the living light. Others, like Peter Damian and Gregory the Great, wrote of dreams as tools of moral correction, gentle warnings to steer the soul back toward virtue. The Middle Ages, far from being an age of darkness, was an age of inner light, the kind that flickers behind closed eyes. For Guillaume, dreams were neither wholly divine nor wholly human. He believed they belonged to a middle space, a medium intermundum, a bridge between two worlds. When a man sleeps, Guillaume wrote, the senses rest, but the imagination continues to work, fed by traces of what the senses once offered. In that silence, the soul might perceive shapes and voices, and sometimes, if properly disposed, something higher might whisper through those shapes. The Bishop of Paris was cautious, however. He warned that not all dreams were to be trusted. The devil, he argued, could disguise himself as light, offering false comfort or prideful visions. The true measure of a dream was its fruit, whether it led the dreamer toward humility and goodness, or toward vanity and confusion. Dreams, in other words, were to be read as moral texts, their meanings discerned through prayer, not curiosity. Imagine, then, a sleepless night in Guillaume's residence near the cathedral. The wind rattles the shutters. The sound of rain patters gently on the roof. He sits in silence, surrounded by manuscripts, some in Latin, others in the Greek of Aristotle or the Arabic of Avicenna. In his hand, a feather quill trembles slightly, catching the light. He writes, the soul, when the body rests, remembers not the world of flesh, but the world from which it came. It is a quiet thought, one that feels almost like a prayer. And as he sets the quill aside, one can imagine him extinguishing the candle and lying down upon his simple bed, the faint scent of ink and parchment still in the air. Outside, the bells mark midnight. He closes his eyes, and the world fades. Perhaps he dreams, perhaps not. But somewhere, across centuries, his words continue to echo softly, reminding us that the medieval mind did not divide reason and wonder as sharply as we do. Dreams were not yet scientific puzzles to be solved. They were living experiences, part of the rhythm of existence. To Guillaume, as to many of his time, they offered glimpses of the soul's quiet work, a steady, unhurried movement between heaven and earth, between thought and faith, between sleeping and waking. By the middle of the 13th century, Guillaume de Verny's ideas on dreams had begun to spread quietly beyond the walls of his study. His writings reached monasteries, cathedral schools, and scholars who wrestled with the same question. What is the mind doing when the body sleeps? To us, that question feels philosophical, even scientific. But to the people of his time, it was a question of salvation. Dreams, they believed, could reveal the state of the soul. Were you living rightly? Had you harbored pride, envy, or anger? A dream might show you, not through accusation, but through symbol. A burning house might reflect a troubled conscience. A dark forest could suggest temptation. A shining light might be grace itself. For medieval thinkers, these images were not illusions of the brain, but reflections of the moral world in miniature. In his role as Bishop of Paris, Guillaume often met with people who came to him seeking guidance. Some were troubled by dreams that frightened them, others by ones that inspired them too much. It is easy to imagine these encounters. The bishop seated in his dimly lit chamber, the visitor kneeling or standing before him, describing their vision in hesitant words. A woman tells of a voice calling her name in the dark. A monk speaks of fire raining from the sky. Guillaume listens, patient and composed. He does not dismiss them. Instead, he speaks slowly, gently reminding them that dreams are not always to be feared, nor always to be trusted. A dream may teach, he writes elsewhere, but it may also test. To the anxious, he offers reassurance, prayer, confession, and charity. To the overzealous, those convinced their dream marks them as chosen. He counsels humility. In this balance lies the quiet wisdom of his time, to believe without vanity, to question without disbelief. Meanwhile, the intellectual world around Guillaume is changing. Translations from Arabic sources have begun to reach Paris. Works by philosophers such as Avicenna and Averroes. These writers describe the imagination as an intermediary between the senses and the intellect, capable of perceiving images even in sleep. Guillaume reads these ideas with care, seeking to harmonize them with Christian teaching. He does not reject reason. He absorbs it, filters it through faith, and turns it into calm reflection. He writes, "When the soul sleeps, it receives the echoes of the day. But when grace touches it, it receives the echo of eternity." For him, that was the essence of dreaming, the meeting point of the ordinary and the divine. Imagine one of his lectures at the University of Paris. The classroom is a vaulted hall, lit by tall, narrow windows. Students sit on benches, their cloaks wrapped tightly against the chill. The bishop stands before them, his voice slow and measured, explaining how the mind might see without the eyes. He speaks of Aristotle's phantasmata, the mental images that linger after perception, and of the way these might become the raw material of dreams. He pauses often, not for dramatic effect, but because the pace of thought itself is slow and deliberate, like the tolling of a bell through fog. When the lesson ends, the students disperse into the streets, their sandals slapping softly against the stones. Some discuss what they've heard. Others are silent, lost in their own reflections. Perhaps that night, a few of them dream of their teacher, his calm voice, his candlelit room, and wake wondering if such a dream, too, might carry meaning. In those years, the University of Paris stood at the crossroads of faith and reason. Scholars debated not only theology, but also medicine, astronomy, and the workings of nature. Yet the subject of dreams held a special place because it touched on everything, body, mind, soul, and the unseen realm that bound them together. Guillaume's writings helped frame that conversation, offering a language gentle enough to hold mystery without breaking it apart. The bishop's reputation grew, but he remained personally austere. He was known for his calm manner, his fondness for quiet evenings of reading, and his reluctance to involve himself in worldly disputes. Those who met him described a man whose presence was steady, like a candle that neither flared nor dimmed. His curiosity about dreams was not driven by ambition, but by wonder, the quiet kind that asks, simply, "What does this mean?" Toward the end of his life, Guillaume grew weaker. He had spent decades in study, and the fatigue of age weighed gently on him. Still, he continued to write, dictating passages to a young clerk as he rested in bed. In one of these final reflections, he wrote that sleep was a mercy, a gift that reminded humankind of its dependence on the Creator. Each night, he said, the soul rehearses its return to God. On his last evening, as the story goes, he asked for his books to be closed and for the Psalms to be read aloud. The candlelight flickered softly, shadows lengthening across the room. He drifted into sleep and never woke again. Those who kept vigil at his bedside later said his face appeared peaceful, as if he were still listening, still waiting for some quiet voice beyond the threshold of the dream. Through his writings, Guillaume Devanny gave shape to the medieval understanding of the mind, not as a machine, but as a living mirror of creation. His calm certainty, his faith in the quiet harmony between thought and mystery, continues to speak softly across the centuries. And so, his life becomes a kind of dream itself, one of study, patience, and listening. For the medieval world, that listening was not passive. It was a form of devotion, a way of attending to the murmur of the unseen, to the whisper that might come in the still hours of the night. After Guillaume d'Auvergne's passing, his writings continued to influence scholars and clergy across Europe. His careful reflections on dreams were copied, annotated, and discussed in monasteries from Paris to Bologna, and even reached England and Spain. His calm, measured approach, a blend of faith, observation, and philosophical reasoning, offered a model for how one might think about the mysterious workings of sleep without fear or superstition. Imagine the quiet scriptorium of a monastery in northern France. Light filters through tall, narrow windows, painting the room with thin beams of gold and dust. Monks sit at long benches, copying manuscripts by hand. Each stroke of the quill is deliberate, each line carefully measured. Guillaume's treatises on dreams occupy several of these books, their margins filled with notes and occasional small illustrations. A sleeping monk, an angel hovering, a candle flickering in darkness. For these monks, dreams were not only personal experiences, but also teaching tools. They discussed the moral weight of visions and tried to interpret them in ways that reinforced faith and virtue. When a novice reported a troubling dream, older monks might recall passages from Guillaume, gently guiding him toward understanding. Remember, they would say, the soul must be judged by its fruits, not its visions alone. In this way, dreams became a part of a quiet moral education, shaping thoughts and actions without haste or dramatic insistence. In the wider world, noble courts took note as well. While Guillaume had lived mostly among scholars, his ideas trickled outward. A king might ask a confessor about troubling visions he had dreamed before battle. A noblewoman might consult a cleric after seeing her child wandering in a luminous garden in a dream. The careful distinction Guillaume had drawn between divine inspiration and falsehood became a guide, to trust without vanity, to heed without fear. Even lay people, who may not have had access to his writings, absorb these principles indirectly. Dream interpretation manuals, inspired by his work and by earlier texts, circulated in both Latin and the vernacular. Pages of symbols and omens, some practical, some moral, were studied quietly beside the hearth. A merchant, finishing his day, might glance at a table of dream meanings, reflecting on a vision of fire or a flock of birds, wondering what guidance it offered for tomorrow. The line between educated and common understanding was subtle. Both relied on experience, observation, and reflection. Guillaume's influence extended beyond the classroom and the court. His writings contributed to a broader medieval conversation about the human mind. Scholars like Thomas Aquinas later explored similar ideas, linking reason and imagination to the soul's capacity for perception beyond the material world. The questions Guillaume had asked about how the mind interprets dreams, how the soul communicates with God, how visions might guide conduct, remain central to intellectual life for generations. Imagine a quiet evening in a late medieval town, long after Guillaume's death. A scholar in a small study opens one of his copied manuscripts. By candlelight, the careful script glows softly on the page. The scholar reads a passage about dreams being bridges between the earthly and the divine. He reflects, not in excitement, but with calm attention, considering how his own nightly visions might carry messages. Somewhere in the distant halls of a cathedral, bells toll softly, marking the hour of vespers. The air is still, yet full of subtle life. Wind rustling leaves, the faint croak of a frog, the slow movement of the Seine through Paris. In all of this, Guillaume's legacy is subtle, almost like a quiet current under the surface. His life reminds us that the study of dreams in the Middle Ages was not sensational or frantic. It was a slow, deliberate exploration of the human spirit. To dream was not merely to imagine. It was to engage in a form of reflection, a gentle dialogue between the soul and the divine. The medieval mind did not rush to classify, dismiss, or fear these nocturnal experiences. Instead, it observed, recorded, and interpreted slowly, patiently, respectfully. And so, the rhythm of thought, observation, and quiet contemplation continued. Across centuries, the idea that dreams held meaning endured, not as prophecy alone, but as a subtle guide, a mirror to the self, and a window into the unseen world. Those who studied them were learning patience, humility, and the art of listening to God, to conscience, and to the gentle whisperings of their own hearts. As we leave Guillaume's life behind, we carry forward the sense of stillness that he embodied. The candle burns low, the manuscript lies open, and outside, the medieval city breathes quietly in the night. Somewhere, a scholar dreams, a monk reflects, and a peasant walks the fields in imagination, guided by visions that remain personal, yet quietly connected to a shared understanding of the unseen. In this calm, measured way, history teaches us that the medieval world did not separate reality from reflection, waking from dreaming. Instead, it embraced the soft, intricate rhythm of life and sleep, offering lessons not of urgency or excitement, but of quiet observation and enduring contemplation. Now let us step gently into the realm of mystery. The traces of medieval beliefs about dreams preserved not only in texts, but in objects, art, and archaeology. These remnants invite us to wander quietly through a world where imagination, symbolism, and ritual were inseparable from daily life. Imagine a quiet monastery library, its shelves lined with parchment manuscripts, some bound in leather, others simply rolled into scrolls. Here, scribes have recorded not only prayers and scripture, but also lists of dreams, omens, and interpretations. These documents survive in fragments today. Faded ink, decorated margins, small illustrations of dreamers in repose, angels hovering, and occasionally symbolic animals like birds or wolves. Each manuscript is a whisper from the past, offering insight into a culture in which dreams were considered messages from beyond. Archaeologists have discovered that medieval homes and castles often bore physical signs of this fascination with dreams. In some rooms, talismans or charms were hidden beneath floorboards or within walls. Small carvings of crosses, protective symbols, or inscribed amulets meant to guard the sleeper. Imagine lifting an uneven floorboard to find a tiny lead tablet etched with a simple prayer, its surface worn smooth by time. To the modern eye, it may seem unassuming, but to those who placed it there, it was a shield against spirits, nightmares, and misfortune. Even the layout of certain rooms reflected an awareness of sleep's significance. Beds were carefully positioned near windows for light and fresh air, yet away from corners where shadows lingered. Canopies might be drawn around sleepers, not only for warmth, but for a sense of enclosure and protection. Tapestries and wall hangings often depicted saints, biblical scenes, or celestial motifs, symbols that might quietly influence dreams, or at least comfort the mind. In towns and marketplaces, objects with similar purposes were available for purchase. Pilgrim souvenirs often included small carved figures, protective stones, or charms inscribed with Latin prayers. These items were not seen as magical in the way we might think of superstition. They were practical extensions of belief, tactile reminders of protection and care. Imagine holding a small carved bird, its wings folded, meant to guard your sleep. Its presence in the home was both calming and morally instructive, a quiet statement of faith intertwined with daily life. The visual culture of dreams extended into illuminated manuscripts as well. In some, you might see a sleeping figure, eyes closed, with an ethereal scene above their head, a castle in the clouds, a saint appearing, or a symbolic animal hovering nearby. Gold leaf would trace the edges of these visions, emphasizing their otherworldly importance. Colors were subdued, calm, and deliberate, meant to suggest contemplation rather than excitement. Red and blue, often used in harmony, guided the eye gently without startling it. One of the most intriguing discoveries related to dreams comes from necropolises, medieval burial sites. Certain skeletons are found with small objects in their hands or around their heads, thought to be meant for the journey after death. Some scholars suggest that these items also reflect the dream culture of the time, protective talismans or symbolic objects designed to ensure safe sleep in the grave, a continuation of care that began in life. Imagine the quiet ceremony as a family lays these objects carefully beside their loved one, hoping that even in rest, both body and soul remain safe. In domestic life, the senses played a key role in influencing dreams. Herbs, flowers, and incense were not only practical, but symbolic. Lavender and rosemary, for example, were used to promote calm and ward off unsettling visions. Imagine a medieval chamber thick with the gentle scent of dried blooms, the texture of rough wool beneath your fingers, and the soft warmth of a hearth at your side. These sensory cues were subtle, yet they shaped the quality of sleep and the character of dreams. Even in art, depictions of dream interpretation were often integrated into religious imagery. Angels might appear to guide a sleeper, or a starry sky might suggest divine presence. The symbolic vocabulary was consistent. Birds represented messages. Water suggested emotion or change. Fire symbolized purification or warning. All of this was designed not to startle, but to comfort, to offer a sense of order and meaning within the unpredictable landscape of night. And then there are inscriptions, graffiti in churches or monasteries. Scholars have recorded Latin phrases scratched in a stone or wood, often prayers for peaceful sleep or protection from troubling dreams. They are small, intimate acts left quietly in corners, reminding us that medieval people were engaged in the same pursuit we often seek today: safe, restorative, and meaningful sleep. Imagine yourself walking slowly through one of these spaces, fingertips brushing stone, eyes tracing illuminated margins. A soft hush of wind moves through an open window. The objects, the colors, the scents all guide the mind toward calm reflection. In these artifacts, the medieval world's fascination with dreams survives, subtle, understated, and profoundly human. As we continue exploring the material traces of medieval beliefs about dreams, it is worth turning our attention to artifacts that reveal not only practical concerns, but the deeper cultural and symbolic meanings attached to sleep and vision. These objects provide a silent dialogue between past and present, letting us enter the quiet, contemplative world of medieval imagination. Consider the small, intricate carvings often found in domestic spaces. Tiny angels, birds, or symbolic animals tucked into nooks and corners. They were rarely intended to be admired for their artistry alone. Their purpose was intimate, subtle, guardians of the sleeper, companions in the nocturnal journey. Imagine placing your hand over such a carving and sensing the centuries of quiet intention embedded in its contours. These were objects of reassurance, reminders that the unseen world was always near, gentle, and watchful. In some homes, herbs were stored in small bundles tied to beams or hung from the ceiling. Lavender, sage, rosemary, and other fragrant plants were believed to guide dreams toward calmness, warding off nightmares or harmful spirits. The scent of dried flowers mixed with the smoke of hearth fires, creating a soft olfactory cocoon. To a medieval sleeper, these subtle fragrances were companions in the night, shaping not only comfort but perception itself. Archaeologists have also uncovered ritual deposits beneath floors, small offerings, often inscribed with prayers or symbols. A fragment of lead might bear a cross. A piece of parchment might carry a short Latin invocation for protection. Some of these items were buried at the threshold of the home, a liminal space between interior safety and the unpredictable exterior world. Imagine the quiet ceremony involved. A family, perhaps at the edge of night, placing a protective object carefully beneath a floorboard, then leaving it, trusting that it would watch over sleep and dreams. Even in art, these concerns are evident. Illuminated manuscripts provide windows into how medieval culture visualized dreams. A sleeping figure may be surrounded by a halo of gold, floating symbols, or angels with delicate gestures. The colors are subdued, soft blues, gentle reds, warm ochres, evoking calm rather than drama. In one image, a star-filled sky hovers over a kneeling dreamer. In another, a symbolic animal drifts above a sleeping child. Each scene balances serenity with subtle meaning, reflecting a culture attuned to nuance and quiet reflection. Certain towns and cities also offer archaeological evidence of sleep culture. In some medieval homes, bed platforms were elevated slightly above the floor, possibly to reduce drafts or dampness. Canopies, often woven from wool or linen, created small enclosed spaces, a cocoon-like environment encouraging focused rest. These choices were functional, certainly, but also symbolic, enclosing the sleeper in a microcosm of protection, comfort, and ritualized calm. Imagine crawling into such a space, soft fabric pressing lightly, shadows dancing with candlelight, and the world outside reduced to a gentle hum. Beyond the household, pilgrimage and religion intersected with dreams. Pilgrims often carried small tokens from shrines, amulets, charms, or inscribed medallions that promised protection not only during travel, but also in sleep. Some bore inscriptions invoking saints. Others depicted symbolic imagery meant to guide dreams toward moral or spiritual insight. These items were tactile reminders of faith, quietly integrated into everyday life. Imagine a pilgrim carefully placing such a charm beneath their pillow, trusting that even in darkness and unconsciousness, divine care remains present. Churches and monasteries themselves bear traces of dream culture. Marginalia in manuscripts often include subtle, whimsical illustrations of sleeping monks, angels, or creatures hovering above. These depictions suggest that even the most solemn institutions recognized the gentle mystery of sleep, not as frivolous, but as an integral part of human experience. Imagine a monk pausing in his work, sketching a dream vision in the margin, and feeling that small act both personal and sacred. The sensory dimension cannot be overstated. The texture of bedding, the scent of herbs, the dim glow of candles, the soft echo of distant bells, all these shaped sleep and dreaming. The medieval world paid attention to these details, aware that the environment of rest influenced the mind's movement through the night. Even in the simplest cottages, these elements combined subtly to create a space in which the soul could wander, explore, and receive gentle messages through dreams. In essence, the material culture of dreams, manuscripts, charms, herbs, architectural choices, reflects a society deeply attuned to the interplay between daily life and the unseen. Objects were not merely functional. They were extensions of belief, subtle instruments of care, and quiet guides to the inner landscape of thought and imagination. Imagine walking slowly through such a space, the hush of a candlelit room, the faint scent of dried lavender, the golden light touching a manuscript's page. You trace the symbols, pause at the images of angels, feel the stillness of centuries pressing softly against the present. In these objects, the medieval fascination with dreams endures, understated, calm, and profoundly human. As we move deeper into the medieval world of dreams, it becomes evident that this fascination was not limited to texts and talismans. The very architecture, artwork, and even burial practices of the time bear traces of an enduring cultural relationship with sleep and the unseen. These artifacts, subtle though they are, reveal a society that sought meaning in the quiet hours, that treated dreams as bridges between life, morality, and the divine. Consider the layout of a castle chamber or a wealthy merchant's bedroom. Beds were often raised on platforms, surrounded by curtains or canopies. Beyond warmth or privacy, these structures serve a symbolic purpose: to create a contained, protected environment for sleep. The enclosed space was believed to shield the sleeper from harmful influences, spirits, restless thoughts, or troubling visions. Imagine pulling the heavy curtains around you, the soft folds pressing gently against the sides of the bed, candlelight flickering, and the world beyond the walls reduced to distant sounds and soft shadows. Illuminated manuscripts further illustrate how medieval culture visualized sleep and dreams. Angels, saints, and symbolic animals frequently hover above slumbering figures. In some illustrations, delicate gold leaf traces halos of light or outlines the forms of spiritual guides. Colors are chosen not for drama, but for calm. Muted blues, soft reds, and warm ochres that soothe the eye. These images were not intended to startle or overwhelm, but to reassure, to provide a visual comfort that complemented the spiritual understanding of sleep. Imagine tracing a finger over the margins of a manuscript, noticing the gentle swirl of color around a sleeping monk or a child, sensing the centuries of quiet care imbued in the page. Archaeological evidence supports this symbolic thinking. Tiny charms, lead tablets, and inscribed amulets are found beneath floors or inside walls. Their inscriptions invoke protection, health, or divine oversight. Sometimes the objects are simple, a cross etched on lead, a small carved figure. Yet their placement reflects a conscious effort to safeguard both body and mind. One can imagine a family kneeling quietly as they embed such an object beneath a floorboard, trusting that it will watch over the sleeper, a silent guardian through the night. Herbs and fragrances also played a role in shaping the dream world. Lavender, rosemary, and sage were hung near beds or woven into pillows, believed to encourage calm sleep and positive visions. Smoke from the hearth mingled with the herbal scents, creating an olfactory environment that guided the imagination. Even for those unaware of scholarly discussions about dreams, these practical measures subtly influence the quality of rest. Imagine inhaling that mixture of warmth, smoke, and herbs as you close your eyes, feeling the mind relax and drift toward gentle visions. Churches and monasteries incorporated dream symbolism into their art and marginalia. A sleeping figure might be accompanied by hovering angels, tiny birds, or symbolic stars. In some cases, monks illustrated visions recorded from their own dreams or those of visitors. These images are intimate, quiet, restrained, and deliberate. They reflect a culture that approached the unseen with curiosity and respect rather than fear or sensationalism. Imagine walking through a monastery library, pausing to notice the margins of a manuscript, seeing angels softly illuminating a slumbering novice. The calmness of the image invites reflection, not excitement. Burial practices also reveal a belief in the continued importance of sleep and dreams beyond life. Some graves contain protective objects, small charms, stones, or inscribed amulets, placed near the head or hands of the deceased. Scholars suggest these items were intended to safeguard the soul as it entered the eternal rest, a continuation of care that began in life. Imagine a medieval family performing these rites in hushed tones, arranging each talisman with quiet intention, aware that sleep and life and rest and death were part of the same moral and spiritual continuum. In all of these examples, the medieval world demonstrates a profound awareness of the subtle forces that shape human consciousness. Dreams were not dismissed as trivial or fanciful. They were carefully observed, recorded, and protected. The combination of manuscripts, objects, architectural design, and sensory experience created a network of influence, a calm, measured culture in which the human mind was invited to explore mystery safely and meaningfully. Imagine stepping into this world as an observer, noticing the interplay of objects, art, and ritual. The smell of herbs drifts through a quiet chamber. Candlelight dances softly on walls. A manuscript lies open, and protective charms rest beneath floorboards. All of it forms a gentle, enveloping rhythm. The rhythm of medieval life attuned to sleep, dreaming, and reflection. In these subtle, careful gestures, we see a society that valued the unseen not with fear or urgency, but with patient attention and serene curiosity. The medieval approach to dreams reminds us that the mind's quiet wanderings are not trivial. They are part of the rhythm of life, a mirror to moral reflection, and a window to spiritual contemplation. Even now, in our modern age, we can sense the echoes of that care and curiosity in manuscripts, in objects, in the enduring idea that sleep and dreams are spaces where the soul and imagination meet. As we move into our final segment, we turn our attention to the lives of the medieval elite and the contrast between their routines, environments, and approach to sleep compared with those of common villagers. The noble household, the castle chamber, and the private studies of wealthy scholars reveal a world where comfort, ritual, and symbolism intertwined, shaping both waking and dreaming life in subtle, deliberate ways. Imagine a stone castle rising above a misty valley. The outer walls are thick, designed to withstand the threats of the world. Yet within, life unfolds in slower rhythms. Tapestries hang along the corridors, softening echoes and insulating against drafts. Heavy curtains frame the tall windows, their embroidered patterns catching the morning light. Here, the elite sleep not only for rest, but for ritual and reflection. And their dreams, like those of villagers, carry meaning, though shaped by wealth, education, and proximity to power. Noble beds were often enormous, draped with embroidered canopies and layered with fine linens, furs, and blankets. Imagine sinking into such a bed after a long day of feasting, discourse, or study. The textures, soft wool, smooth linen, and the occasional rougher weave, create a sense of security and warmth. Candles are carefully positioned to provide gentle illumination, casting slow-moving shadows across tapestries depicting saints, mythological scenes, or heraldic symbols. These visual cues are not merely decorative. They participate in the moral and spiritual rhythm of the household. The noble household often employed attendants whose role extended beyond convenience. A chamberlain or maid might prepare the bed, sprinkle herbs or incense, and ensure that the room was free of distractions. Their movements were quiet, deliberate, and unhurried. In these small rituals, we see an awareness that comfort, both physical and spiritual, contributes to the quality of rest and, by extension, the nature of dreams. Imagine the hushed rhythm of footsteps on stone floors, the subtle crackle of the fireplace, and the faint scent of lavender or rosemary permeating the air. Even the daily schedule shaped sleep in ways that common folk might not experience. Nobles observed canonical hours, times for prayer interwoven with leisure, study, and work. Nighttime was often divided into first and second sleep, just as among peasants, but the elite could arrange their environment to reduce interruption. Quieter rooms, private chambers, and servants to attend to needs without the sleeper leaving the bed. The rhythm was slower, more deliberate, and designed to cultivate reflection as much as rest. Diet also influenced rest and dreams. Meals were richer and more varied than those of villagers, often including roasted meats, baked bread, cheeses, and wine. While nutrition impacted physical well-being, it also subtly shaped the subconscious. A heavy meal before first sleep might produce restless visions, while lighter fare encouraged calm. Imagine a noble returning to bed after a modest supper by candlelight, feeling both satiated and gently soothed, the day's experiences settling into a soft inner rhythm that guides dreams. Scholarly pursuits added another layer of difference. Many nobles were educated, literate, and familiar with classical texts. Their sleep was sometimes preceded by reading or reflection. A lord might ponder philosophy, study astrology, or contemplate a moral dilemma before resting. Such mental activity shaped dreams in ways more deliberate and symbolic than those of the peasantry. Imagine a candlelit chamber, parchment open, the flicker of flame dancing across Latin script, and the mind drifting gradually into visions influenced by both education and imagination. Even in social interaction, dreams held significance. In elite circles, recounting visions could become part of discourse, not with panic but with curiosity. Dreams might be interpreted as advice, subtle warning, or inspiration. A noblewoman might describe a vision of a garden, prompting reflection on household management or spiritual practice. A young lord might record a strange image in a personal notebook, considering its moral implications. In these acts, dreams were woven into the fabric of both private and public life, forming a gentle link between imagination and responsibility. Contrasts with common life are evident but subtle. Villagers relied on natural rhythms, the environment of hearth, floor, and canopy, and collective wisdom passed down over generations. Nobles, by contrast, combined comfort, ritual, and reflection, creating a controlled space that nurtured both sleep and symbolic imagination. Yet both shared a fundamental belief: dreams mattered. They were more than mental images. They were reflections of the soul, windows into moral, spiritual, and emotional experience. Imagine standing quietly in a noble chamber as night settles. The hearth flickers softly, curtains sway gently in a cool draft, and the mind, free from immediate necessity, begins to wander. Thoughts of the day mingle with visions shaped by books, faith, and habit. Somewhere in the distance, the toll of a bell marks the canonical hour. The rhythm is deliberate, measured, and calm. A reminder that even in power and wealth, sleep and dreaming remain essential, sacred, and gently mysterious. As the night deepens in the noble household, subtle differences in daily rhythm and social hierarchy become apparent. While peasants and villagers followed the rhythms of light, labor, and seasonal necessity, the elite enjoyed a life structured by ceremony, education, and controlled environment. Sleep, though still essential, was interwoven with deliberate ritual, comfort, and reflection, a contrast that illuminates the diverse ways the Middle Ages approached the unseen world of dreams. Imagine a young noblewoman in her private chamber. The canopy bed, draped with embroidered linen, shelters her from drafts and noise. Beside her, a small table holds a vessel of water and a bundle of lavender. A candle burns low, its golden glow illuminating a page of her devotional readings. She closes her eyes slowly, the faint aroma of herbs settling in the room, her thoughts drifting gently from the events of the day toward the subtle imagery of dreams. In such an environment, the mind is encouraged to wander calmly, absorbing lessons from both experience and imagination. Attendants, still present but unobtrusive, play a quiet role in shaping sleep. A chambermaid may adjust a blanket or ensure the fire does not flicker too wildly, while a page might quietly close shutters to keep the room dark. These small actions, unnoticed by the sleeper, create an atmosphere that encourages mental calm, allowing dreams to unfold without interruption. Imagine the rhythmic hush of footsteps across polished stone floors, a soft swish of fabric, the occasional faint creak of timber, all blending into a gentle, steady background for sleep. The elite also incorporated symbolic objects into their nightly environment. Small carved figures, religious medallions, and illustrated manuscripts often adorned their chambers. Each item served as a subtle guide for reflection, moral instruction, or spiritual reassurance. A bird or angel figure might be placed near the pillow, a manuscript laid open to a passage on virtue or contemplation. These visual cues were designed to influence dreams gently, guiding the mind toward calm, constructive imagery rather than fright or agitation. Contrast this with the peasant household. Here, sleep might occur on simple beds of straw or rushes, often shared with family or animals. Comfort was functional, not luxurious, and the rhythms of sleep were dictated by labor, light, and the needs of the household. Yet despite these differences, both elite and common households shared a belief in the meaningfulness of dreams. Whether through ritual, charms, or careful observation, sleep and the imagination were treated as spaces of moral, spiritual, and practical significance. Daily activity influenced dreams for the elite as well. Heavy feasts, music, or extended study sessions could shape nocturnal visions. A lord might drift into sleep after an evening of chess or philosophical debate, the images of strategy and morality blending in dreams. A noblewoman might contemplate a verse from scripture, the symbolism lingering in the mind as the body rests. These activities were quieter, more deliberate than the physical labors of peasant life, yet they served the same essential purpose: to maintain a connection between waking and dreaming, thought and reflection. Even illness and infirmity were treated with care in elite households. Herbal remedies, gentle prayers, and small rituals helped prepare the body and mind for restorative sleep. A sick child might have a talisman placed beneath their pillow, a soft blanket tucked in carefully, and a candle left to burn steadily. The attention to comfort, environment, and ritual demonstrates a subtle awareness of how sensory experience shapes dreams, offering a measure of psychological and spiritual support. Imagine now the quiet castle at the deepest hour of night. The halls are still, except for the occasional muffled sound of guards or a distant animal. Candlelight flickers across the walls, illuminating tapestries and carved furniture in a soft glow. In each chamber, the rhythm of sleep unfolds. Breathing slows, eyelids close, and the mind drifts through its own inner landscape. Dreams emerge gently, influenced by environment, habit, and contemplation. The space is controlled, safe, and deliberate, a marked contrast to the more variable conditions of peasant life, yet underpinned by the same attention to meaning and reflection. Despite these contrasts, the shared human concern is evident. All sought rest, comfort, and understanding through sleep. Dreams were a bridge connecting experience to morality, reflection to imagination, and waking life to the unseen. Both elite and common folk approached this space with respect, curiosity, and subtle ritual. Through careful observation of objects, scents, and light, each household, whether grand castle or modest cottage, sought to shape the night, guiding the mind toward calm and restorative visions. In this way, the medieval world demonstrates continuity across social classes. Though wealth, education, and environment shape the experience, the human impulse to find meaning in sleep and dreams remained universal. The rhythms, rituals, and objects of the elite merely reflect a more deliberate expression of what was already a shared cultural understanding. Sleep, dreams, and reflection were intertwined, offering a gentle reminder of the quiet, contemplative life that existed even amidst power, wealth, and social distinction. As we conclude our exploration of social contrasts in medieval sleep, it becomes clear that the rhythm of life, the environment, and subtle rituals all shaped how dreams were experienced. In noble households, sleep was cushioned not only by physical comfort, but by attentiveness to sensory, spiritual, and moral cues. This created an environment where dreams could emerge calmly, guided by habit, reflection, and quiet observation. Picture the castle at the deepest hours of night. Corridors are silent, tapestries absorbing every faint footfall. A noble chamber glows softly from candlelight, shadows stretching across carved wooden furniture. The air carries a delicate scent of herbs, lavender, rosemary, perhaps a hint of incense from evening prayers. The sleeper, whether lord or lady, lies surrounded by objects chosen for comfort and symbolic meaning. A manuscript open to a passage on virtue, a small medallion placed near the pillow, embroidered linens cushioning the body. All of these are not mere decoration. They participate in a subtle choreography designed to guide both body and mind toward rest. Daily life had structured this rhythm carefully. Meals, study, and prayer were aligned with canonical hours, creating predictable intervals for reflection and repose. Even the timing of bed preparation was deliberate. Attendants would adjust blankets, ensure warmth, and maintain the room's serenity. Outside, the castle walls shielded inhabitants from the unpredictable elements, creating a controlled environment that encouraged slow transition from wakefulness to the gentle drift of sleep. Contrast this with the peasant household, where labor, natural light, and communal activity dictated the sleep schedule. Beds were often shared, warmth and comfort functional rather than luxurious. Yet, even here, attention was paid to dreams and protection. Herbs might be placed under the pillow, prayers whispered before sleep, and small charms tucked within reach. Though the environment was less controlled, the underlying cultural principle remained the same. Sleep was not passive. It was a time for the body to rest and the soul to reflect, for dreams to convey meaning and guidance. Elite households, however, layered additional practices atop these shared beliefs. Reflection before sleep was common. A lord might consider the moral implications of the day. A noblewoman read devotional texts or reviewed household accounts, and both might contemplate dreams recorded previously or seek quiet insight through imagination. The mind, primed with reflection, was prepared to receive visions that were symbolic, instructive, or gently inspiring. Imagine a noble reading by candlelight, the flickering flame casting long shadows on the walls, each word settling into the mind like a gentle suggestion, shaping the dreams that follow. Even illness was approached with this same combination of care and reflection. A sick child in a castle might be tended with herbs, prayers, and talismans, creating a calm, nurturing environment conducive to healing rest. Attendants moved quietly, adjusting blankets and light, maintaining serenity and rhythm. In this way, both body and mind were attended to, allowing sleep to function as a restorative space rather than merely a physical necessity. In art and material culture, these practices are preserved. Illuminated manuscripts depict sleeping figures surrounded by halos of light, angels, or symbolic animals. Tapestries and carvings echo these motifs in physical space. Protective talismans, small charms, and carefully chosen furnishings are silent witnesses to a culture deeply attentive to the unseen world. Even the simplest gestures, a candle placed on a bedside table, the scent of herbs wafting gently through the chamber, were intended to influence the quality of sleep and the character of dreams. Yet despite differences in wealth and social hierarchy, a remarkable continuity emerges. Both nobles and peasants understood that sleep and dreams held significance, that the mind did not rest entirely even when the body did. In each household, objects, rituals, and observation intertwined with imagination, guiding rest, reflection, and moral contemplation. The elite refined these practices with comfort, control, and aesthetic attention, but the underlying concern for meaningful, safe, and restorative sleep was universal. As the night deepens, the castle settles into a quiet rhythm. Outside, the world is still. Inside, candles flicker, and sleepers drift through visions shaped by both the day and the deliberate calm cultivated by their environment. The contrast between noble and peasant life are evident, yet the essential human pursuit remains the same: to find solace, meaning, and gentle guidance in the mysterious, restorative realm of dreams. The medieval world, in its attention to sleep, dreams, and reflection, reminds us that care for the mind was as deliberate as care for the body. Across social classes, individuals engaged with the unseen, shaped their nocturnal experiences, and used ritual, environment, and imagination to navigate the quiet hours. Sleep was not merely a pause from activity, but an ongoing dialogue with self, community, and the divine, a rhythm that endures subtly across centuries. As our journey through the Middle Ages comes to a close, we take a final, quiet moment to reflect on the lives, beliefs, and dreams of those who lived centuries before us. From the simplest peasant household to the grandest castle chamber, sleep was more than a pause from the day. It was a rhythm, a ritual, and a window into both the mind and the soul. Across centuries, people have sought rest not only for their bodies, but for the guidance, reflection, and gentle insight that dreams could provide. Imagine the medieval night stretching quietly across village and city alike. In a humble cottage, the scent of herbs mingles with the cool air, straw beds pressed close for warmth, and dreams drift gently through the minds of those who labor and pray. In a castle, soft linens, candles, and careful rituals create a sanctuary for both body and thought. Across every room, across every social boundary, One principle is constant. Sleep is sacred and dreams matter. They are the silent companions of life, shaping reflection, morality, and imagination. The manuscripts, talismans, and small objects we have explored today offer us more than historical insight. They remind us that even in a world without electricity, modern medicine, or instant communication, human beings attended to their inner lives with patience, care, and deliberate attention. Each charm placed under a pillow, each candle lit beside a manuscript, each careful reflection before rest, all echo a timeless human understanding. The hours of sleep are a gentle bridge between waking and unseen worlds, between thought and imagination, between life and quiet contemplation. As you settle into your own space tonight, perhaps lying beneath blankets that are soft and familiar, it is comforting to imagine the continuity of this experience. You are part of a long chain of sleepers, thinkers, and dreamers. People who have, for centuries, closed their eyes and let the mind wander, guided by ritual, comfort, and curiosity. From the monks of northern France to the noble families of Parisian castles, from the peasants tending hearth and field to the scholars copying manuscripts by candlelight, sleep has been both a necessity and a quiet art. So now, as the candlelight of this narrative flickers gently, allow your own mind to drift. Think of the quiet chambers, the scented herbs, the soft rustle of linens, and the gentle illumination of manuscripts that guided medieval dreamers. Feel the rhythm of life, deliberate, unhurried, and serene, and let it carry you into rest. In this moment, you are part of the same calm, enduring world of reflection, imagination, and gentle mystery. If this quiet journey through history has brought a sense of peace, feel free to like the video, share it with others who might enjoy gentle storytelling, or subscribe for more calm reflections from the past. And I would love to know in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and perhaps what dreams or thoughts accompany you as you settle. It is strangely comforting to feel connected, knowing that even across time and space, countless others are finding rest in the same gentle stories. So dim your lights, let the medieval whispers fade softly into the night, and allow your mind to drift with them. Sleep, after all, has always been a shared human ritual, a time for reflection, dreams, and quiet wonder. Let the calm of the past guide your own journey into rest, and let the rhythms of history lull you gently into sleep.